I'm Dr. Arlene Eakle. Welcome to Do Your Family Tree. This is a wonderful time to trace your family tree. Libraries are filled with microfilm, with books, with microfiche, new sources now available which have your ancestors nicely recorded in them, just waiting for you to pull them out. This is a wonderful time to do your family tree because there is a great emphasis on the preservation of records. There is an emphasis on writing family trees and leaving them behind for posterity, for grandparents to write their family memories for their grandchildren, for parents to assist children and to assist brothers and sisters in putting the information down before it's forgotten. When you start your family tree, you begin with a pedigree chart. You fill the information in on the chart. You put yourself on line 1. You put your parents, your father on line 2, and your mother on line 3. This particular pedigree chart that we are using in this tape and that we recommend that you use is set up a little differently than the norm. It starts with died first. We search in reverse order. Your ancestors lived their lives from birth to death, but when you search from them. You search them, death through birth. And so this chart has been set up in that fashion. Fill out the chart from your own memory, starting with yourself and then adding the information about your parents and your grandparents as you remember it. Then get out the documents that you have in your possession. Perhaps you have your own birth certificate. You may have an obituary for a grandfather. Check what you have put on the chart from these documents. For your information from your memory and the documents together will give you the very best basis for your family tree. And this is the basis that you will fill every generation out as you go back in time. We have begun with Sarah Elizabeth Sanderson. You write the names in the order in which they are spoken. Sarah Elizabeth Sanderson. Her father is Charles Sanderson, and her mother is Elizabeth Burnett. And so those names now go on to the family chart. We have, for the basis of this information, family records. We've used the baby book that was filled out by one of the family members from the recall that they had in their own memory, from letters written back and forth between family members, and from the personal knowledge they had of the relationships. Relationship is the most important bit of evidence and information on a pedigree chart. It shows the relationship between a child, the parents, and the grandparents, and so on through the generations back in time. We calculate relationship by generations. If you start with a common ancestor, which is the first generation, and then you go to the child, which is the second generation, to the grandchild, which is the third generation, then you can begin to calculate how people are related to each other. If you have cousins, you can then see them, but they begin in the third generation. We have a special chart which shows you how to calculate these relationships. One of the things that we joke about as we talk about a family tree are the removes, where we have someone who is removed 1 time or 2 times or 3 times. And about the easiest way that I know to describe it and to understand it is to line your hands up. This is the common generation. If you have someone who is a lower generation or a higher generation, that is the remove. If you go down a step, it is 1 step removed. If you go down 2 steps, it's 2 steps removed. So you might be first cousins 2 times removed. So if you are having difficulty in understanding how people are related, put your hands up, line them up with a common generation, and then move them down 1 step for a remove, down 2 steps for the second time remove, 3 steps, and so on. It is possible, you know, that you could be related to Prince Charles of England. 22 cousins, 3 times removed. For his ancestors and your ancestors may converge in England if you have an English background. Now, there is a special way to fill out this lineage chart. so that you get the information correct, and there is no chance that it can be misinterpreted. When you write the date, you write it first with the day, and then the month, and then the year. You use the word to separate the two sets of numbers. This will keep the numbers separate, and then they don't get mixed up. You enter the places with the smallest place first, the town or the village, the city, then the county or district or province, finally the state or district or province, and then the country, depending on where your ancestors came from. This is all you need to know about filling out the chart. If you know that you are going to search backward in time, starting with death and moving then to the birth. If you know that you're going to write the names in the order in which you speak them. If you know that you're going to write the dates with the month separating the two sets of numbers, and the places starting with the smallest and then going to the largest, which is the country. That's all you have to remember about the pedigree chart. It's a very simple chart to use. Now we are using the family of Sanderson. Sarah Elizabeth Sanderson is our grandmother. Christopher Wilson, her husband, is our grandfather. And we are going to build this family tree from a variety of sources. The only time that you will have additional information that you need to worry about on the chart itself is if your ancestor named his farm or his particular residence. Sometimes you will find that there is an extra place name. And I usually like to add it separate at the bottom of the particular section of the chart where that ancestor is recorded. There is a little bit of space that you can use to fill in specific information, and that's where I like to put it so that I can highlight it and keep it in mind, for it is as important to the identity of your ancestor as his own name or his date or the place where he lived. As soon as you have filled out your information and checked it against your documents, it's now time for you to begin contacting your family members and your close relatives. What you want to do is to fill in additional information from family sources so that when you get into the research segment of your family tree, you will be working with family known information. You will know where to look and you will know what you're going to look for. This is an extremely important step. If you bypass what your relatives have to tell you, you may attach the wrong person to your pedigree in the research step. So the next step is to go to your relatives and to find out what they know. They may have in their possession the information that it would take you a great deal of money and a lot of time to find in a research source, and it will be easily available to you if you simply ask for it. We have developed an interview checklist so that you can know exactly what to ask for. The research interview is a little different than a family or life story interview. In a life story interview, you will want to record childhood happenings, games that were played, and things of this kind. When you're interviewing for a research interview, when you conduct a research interview, there are other questions that are more important. Perhaps one of the most important I have highlighted on the checklist is where are family members buried? The cemetery where these family members are located can help you to locate places of origin and to put family members together into family units so that you can see what the naming patterns are. They will often give you additional information, like the original spelling of the immigrant's name. So the cemetery is an extremely important place to do research, and where the family members will lead you to that particular place. The second thing that you want to know is there anyone famous on your family tree? Are you indeed related to President John Adams? Are you a cousin to George Washington? Is it really true that the Lincoln on your pedigree is related to the president? For those families have already been traced, and it's much easier to begin with information that's already been located for you. A second thing that you will want to do is to find out about the church that your ancestors attended, for this will give you entree to the places of origin, especially in Europe. For unlike America, where we can belong to any religion and any church we wish to, in Europe, you belong to the same church that your ruler or prince or governor belongs to. And knowing in advance what the official religion of your family was will give you entree to that information. You also want to find out about the records that your family has in their possession already. Do they have a family Bible? Old letters from friends or relatives, particularly those who stayed behind in the old country. When your ancestors came to these shores, did they keep a travel or immigrant diary? If there is one time in the past when your grandmother would have kept a diary, it would have been when she traveled to a new country. Do you have a logo from the family business that your family has operated, found on a letterhead or perhaps on a catalog cover? Your family may have in its possession obituaries clipped from newspapers or news articles which tell a lot about the family. And finally, what about photographs? Do you have photographs that you can use? These are one of the richest sources because they can give us information about the origins of the family, the particular ethnic group, military service, occupation, the number of children in the family that we need to watch for as we go through census records and other sources. Now, if you have an immigrant ancestor that you're looking for, there are some additional things that you need to know. First of all, do they know where the family resided when they first came to this country, the original place of settlement in America? Secondly, who was left behind? When your ancestor came, did he leave brothers and sisters, perhaps parents, behind? Or did they come too? Sometimes the parents will come as very elderly people. And if you know that they came, then you can watch for them and pick up their deaths in this country. We need also to know the port of departure and the port of entry. As we researched the Wilson family earlier, before we actually began with the Sandersons, we discovered that the family had left from a place called Portadown, Ireland. Portadown, interestingly enough, is not on the coast. It's an inland town. And this is something that seems rather foreign to us. We usually think of leaving a port on a city on a coastline where the ship would pull into a berth, take on passengers, and then sail off across the ocean. Many of our ancestors have their exit documents recorded at the particular town where they got permission to leave. And so that town becomes extremely important, for it will be somewhere in a small radius of that town that you will find the origins of that ancestor. So you want to know where they left. You also want to know where they entered as they came into this country, so that you can search passenger lists. You can look for naturalization records and other sources of that experience. All of these items are included on the interview checklist, so that you will know as you go into the interview with your relatives what to ask for. Now remember that the information that your relatives tell you and the documents which they have in their possession are two separate and distinct sources. And they often will conflict in the evidence that they give. One of the interesting things that we have discovered is that as we go through an interview, we have to be very, very careful that we listen carefully. We have to listen for the information that our relatives tell us. It's easy to get caught up in the interview process and to forget to listen to what they say, so that the questions that we ask and the answers that they give have no direct connection. If you listen carefully to what the ancestor says or what the aunt or the cousin or the grandparent tells you, then you can go on to other questions at a later time. Ask one question at a time. Let the person who's talking completely answer it. If they pause with them. Take this time to relax. so that you can enjoy the interview and get into the spirit of the occasion, the experience in relating to this particular relative. I would suggest that you mix open-end questions with those that can be answered with a specific answer. So if you want to know the exact residence where your ancestor was living when they left the old country, and then the first place of settlement here, you can ask that question. But when you ask about the immigrant experience, say, what was it like to leave your home behind and come to a new country? One of the questions that I always like to start with kind of sets the stage for the interview, but it also has a tendency to let you relax, is to say, what's it like to be a Sanderson? How do you feel about carrying the name Sanderson? Have you ever been embarrassed because you were named Sanderson? Let them begin to tell you about what it's like to be a Sanderson, and then move easily into some of the other questions that you want answers to. It's very easy to lead an individual to the point where they will answer what you ask. It's very easy to lead them into telling you what you want to know, not necessarily what might be true. If you ask an open-ended question, one that cannot be answered with a yes or a no, you're more apt to get the real information. Now, on your screen will appear a little chart that helps you to determine the factors that influence accuracy. First of all, is the relative an eyewitness? Were they present at the birth? If you're talking about your grandfather or talking to your grandfather about his son or his daughter, was he present at the birth? If he is an eyewitness, he was present and he saw with his own eyes and heard with his own ears. And it really doesn't matter how much time has elapsed over between the time that the event occurred and they tell you about it. The individual is still an eyewitness. Now, generally, an eyewitness account is 75% accurate. If you are reporting actions, it is 90% accurate. If I tell you what I did or what happened to me, that's approximately 90% of the time you can expect it to be true. But if I am reporting on colors or I am reporting on whether there was another person present, it's only going to be 50% accurate because I have to go back into my memory and try to recapture that particular event and exactly what happened at the time. Now, if it's a free narrative, in other words, if you allow your ancestor or your relative to tell you what he wants you to hear, it's going to be more accurate, but it will have less detail. What you can do then later is go in and ask specific questions about the details you want to know more about. If you ask specific questions, the accuracy will decrease up to 55%. So that's a rather remarkable shift in accuracy, and that's why the open-ended questions are so significant in an interview. If the testimony is given under oath, it will be approximately 90% accurate, for there's just something about swearing that you will tell the truth and then trying to tell a lie. For some people, it is impossible. It's one of those situations. If you ask me no questions, I'll tell you no lies. But if you ask me the right thing, I will give you the truth. The second-hand account is where you're dealing with something that you have heard or read from someone else. You were not present at that event. Now, interestingly enough, the greater the time elapsed between the event and when you tell about it, the greater the accuracy. So if you are asking someone about something that they have been told, if it was a long time ago, you're liable to get a much more accurate recount of what they were told than if you are asking them immediately following. For over time, they have a tendency to think about what they had been told and whether or not it could be true, what factors might affect the truth. So it's important that you realize there is a distinction between a first-hand and a second-hand account. Now, if it is a male that you are interviewing, the record will be more accurate. If it is a female you interview, the record will be more complete. If you interview children, they will be free from prejudice, and at the same time, they are easily led. You can tell them what you want to know, and they will make up something in order to please you. So you have to be very careful when you talk to a child. If you're interviewing an elderly person, I suggest that you take along someone of the next generation, a grandchild, a niece or a nephew, or just a young friend. For there is a greater rapport between a very old individual and a very young one. And for some reason, more truthful information is given as they cross the generations. And so we call it a cross-generation interview. If you are talking about something that could be a potential family skeleton, I suggest that in the first interview that you avoid anything controversial or that could be a skeleton. It is much better that you get some basic information about the family and you do some research first, then go back and get the skeleton. Clear it up. By then you will have some facts so that you can judge what is true and what is not true. You will also then be able to avoid those things that might be intimidating or explosive as you conduct the interview, and you'll be much more likely to get the truth. Let me just describe for you a very important interview in my life. When I was asked to talk with a very elderly individual, and after I had conducted the pre-interview meeting, and I do suggest that you do that, visit with the person you're going to interview ahead of time by telephone, by letter, or in person, and then go and conduct the interview. As I interviewed this elderly gentleman, I took with me my young son. He sat my son in front of him on a footstool, took him by the hand, and told him about his life. He told him about the importance of his marriage. He told him about his grandparents and how important they were to him and what they had done with their lives. It was an important experience for him. It was equally important for my son, but I got a great deal more information than I would have gotten under any other circumstance. I can remember interviewing a man who told me that when he inherited his property, he also inherited the obligation to take care of a grave which was on the hillside, some distance from his home. And all the time that he was able to climb that hill, he took care of the grave. When he was too old to climb the hill any further, he simply hired someone to care for that grave. Indelibly impressed upon my mind and making it possible for me to put it on a map was that incident. By asking an open-ended question, what obligations went with the farm? So there are a number of ways to interview individuals using cross-generation interviews, calling them on the telephone if you cannot make a personal visit. Probably the least productive is to write to a relative. When you ask for a lot of detail, it's very difficult to get them to write it all down. But if you will call on the phone or visit them in person, you will be successful. I want to say a few things about equipment in an interview. A tape recorder is a very useful device. It frees you from taking notes so that you can listen to the interview. You can mark those things that you want to refer to later or follow up on. It preserves on tape the voice of the individual, the particular personality of the person that you're talking to. And it allows you to spot pauses where the individual is thinking what to tell you, sometimes sifting what is true and what they want you to know. So it's a very useful device, and I do recommend that you use a tape recorder. However, a tape recorder can be intimidating to an older person. If this is the case, I suggest that you downplay the use of the recorder, perhaps using a handheld recorder that you point the red button that shows that you're recording toward yourself rather than to the person being interviewed, so that they are less aware of the equipment and more aware of the fact that they are telling you about themselves or about their families. If you have a young child, the interview can include as an integral part the actual tape recorder. For one of the fun things that a young person likes to do is to operate electronic equipment, and some of them are very adept at it. This often removes the intimidation of the equipment in the eyes of the older person, as they watch the skill of a very young person using equipment that they themselves are not familiar with. This is especially true if you use a video camera. And with the cost of a video camera making it more possible to have one in each home, you can use a video camera to good advantage. If you plan to use a video, it is my recommendation that you alert the person you will interview ahead of time so that they can prepare themselves and their home to be seen again and again on a videotape. For it is extremely embarrassing to some people to have you come into the normal clutter of everyday life. One final tip. If you are going to conduct an interview on the front porch, the use of a camera or the use of a tape recorder will be a problem because of the outside noise. If the interview is to be held inside, however, ignore the ticking clock or the squeak in the chair as your relative shifts his weight, for they're part of the music of his life, and they will not detract from the interview. Now that you have collected information from your own memory and your own documents, and those of your relatives, you need to do an assessment of the evidence that they present you with. If you are lucky, you will be able to complete the next stage of your family tree without a lot of conflicting information. However, that's often unreal. In most instances, what you have been told and what is actually recorded on the documents will be different. We have an excellent example in the recording of a marriage, for we have 5 different records, each one giving different information. First of all, we have 2 marriage certificates, both of them issued by the same official in the church, both of them including different information. The first marriage certificate says that the marriage occurred on the 26th of June. The second marriage certificate said that it occurred on the 27th. Both of them agree on the place of the marriage, Dorchester, Massachusetts, in St. Anne's Church. The second document is a record of marriage that is the official marriage record if you write for a vital record. This is the one recorded by the state. It gives 2 additional pieces of information. First of all, that the date of the marriage is the 28th of June, and that the place of the marriage was Revere, Massachusetts. The third document is the family Bible, possibly recorded sometime after the marriage occurred, giving an additional place, that of Roxbury, Massachusetts, and the 27th of June for the marriage. Now, the preponderant piece of information, meaning the piece that carries the greater weight, is the diary entry of the bride herself, written in her own handwriting, where she actually describes what happened on her wedding day. She says, as we lived in Revere, and St. Anne's Church was in Dorchester, the wedding supper and all of the celebration was to be at her sister's, which was in Roxbury. She tells about how her bridegroom came, visited, and how she was very much aware that her life was about to change. And then she says, the morning of June the 27th, George and I. So we know that the wedding occurred on the 27th of June. Now remember what we said about the accuracy of information, that when you describe an action as opposed to something that was peripheral to your event, that you're going to be approximately 90% accurate. So we know that the bride's diary entry pulls the parts together, and seemingly conflicting information now fits together nicely. As we put together the Sanderson family information on our chart when we actually began it from family records, we used a source checklist, which is now on your screen. highlighted for the specific kinds of information that we used for our entries: oral traditions, letters, and birth records, recorded in the family book that was given to the baby, well, actually kept for the baby for a later time. All of this information agreed as it applied to the Sanderson family. We're going to now build on this information. This forms our family known information, and it will be from here that we will link the information we find in research sources in order to extend the Sanderson family tree. For all we have at the moment are the names of our grandparents and then the names of Sarah Elizabeth Sanderson's parents, Charles Sanderson and Elizabeth Burnett. But as we move into the research phase, we will extend this pedigree another 2 generations. The third step in creating a family tree is doing research, going into public records to fill in gaps and to extend the pedigree beyond the memory and recall of what the family could tell you and what you knew yourself. We've done that with the Sanderson family chart. The pedigree shows in black what we got from our family information. The information recorded in blue is the extensions that we got to this chart from vital records, from death certificates and from cemetery sexton files. For that's the next section of our research. We're going to go into vital records. It is at this point that you have 2 choices. Number 1, you can use the resources of the Family History Library located in Salt Lake City, which has made it a point to collect on microfilm the vital records of many states already. And hopefully, before they're through with their microfilming project, they will acquire the vital records of all of the states. And it is possible to go to your local Family History Center and order on microfilm the very certificate that you would otherwise have to write to the state for. You can write to the state, however, if you find that easier, or if there isn't a branch library of the Family History Library in Salt Lake City available to you. Now, I have a few ways, 12 to be exact, that will help you to get your information back from the county clerk or from the state official if you write for a birth or a marriage or a death. There is a tremendous demand for this information on the part of genealogists. After all, there are more than 500,000 of us writing letters to local counties and to state officials. So if you want an answer to your written request for a birth or a marriage or a death from a public official, these 12 tips will help you. Number 1 is to keep your letter as brief as possible. Clerks do not have time to read about your genealogy, and they really have no interest. They simply want to know what it is that you want. Number 2 is to leave a blank space between each question on the letter so that they can fill in the information right on the letter rather than to have to send you a separate letter. Number 3 is to use a correct address. There are a number of books that you can go to acquire the addresses, and there is a very nice, concise list at the end of this tape of the Bureau of Vital Records for each of the states. Number 4, address officials by their correct title. If you don't know what the title is, you can check the Handbook of Genealogical Correspondence that was published in 1974 by Everton Publishers. The addresses are out of date in many respects, but the titles are still correct. It gives you the proper etiquette for writing a letter to a public person. Include your return address on your letter. In most offices, the envelopes are thrown away and only the letter is kept. If you do not include your return address, you will not receive a response. Always include a self-addressed stamped envelope with your request. This enables the public official to send you back what you asked for at no public cost and will often determine whether you get a written response. Number 7, if your letter does not bring an immediate reply, send a gentle reminder. Do not intimidate and do not threaten the public official. Remember that they have many other tasks to perform in addition to answering your correspondence. Be considerate of a clerk's time and express appreciation for help when it is given, especially if a clerk goes out of his way to help you. If the clerk says there is no entry, wait a couple of months and write again. Sometimes as the clerk looks, perhaps the volume that had your information in it has been removed from the shelf. Perhaps a particular certificate has been misfiled. Give the office a chance to get its materials reorganized, and then ask again. Number 10, calculate your search dates carefully so the clerk can search the specific 5-year segment where your documents will be found. Some clerks have narrowed the search time down for any given fee to 1 year only, so that if you order a marriage certificate and they don't find it, they will still charge you the $10, and you'll have to pay $10 to get a second search done. On your screen, we have the period approximation chart, which shows 3 possibilities for calculating the birth. For example, if you have the marriage date, subtract 16 years from that date, then subtract 40 years from that marriage date, and then search the period between the dates. Now you see an additional 3 categories or possibilities for acquiring the birth date. For example, if you're looking for, or if you already know, a female with several children, subtract 16 years from the date of the first child, subtract 50 years from the date of the last child, and then search the period between those dates. Now on the screen you will see 3 possibilities for the marriage date. If you already know an age at a specific event, calculate the age at 15, then add 25 years to that date and search the period between those 2 dates. For the death, it is much easier to calculate. You calculate the birth date approximately 90 years before. Interestingly enough, some people are now living to be well over 100. And so in finding a particular death date, you have an extensive time period during which you will be searching. Be sure to ask for the right document. If you are trying to prove the date of the birth, be sure you ask for the birth record. If you get the birth record and it does not give you the birth information that you need, you can also get it from the death record. The marriage record will rarely give you birth information. And number 12 is to request a photocopy of the original record, not a certified extract. Number 1, it will probably be cheaper for you. You will not have to pay all of the cost of a certified copy. And number 2, you will get the actual information, and there will be less chance of error. As the transcription is made, we often get errors. Sometimes with dates, sometimes with places, even more importantly with names. So ask for a photocopy to begin with. I want to refer back to the Sanderson Pedigree Chart so that we can take a fresh look at what we have learned from the vital records. This information has been added in blue to the information that we acquired from the family sources. And there is one piece of evidence that is very important for the Sandersons and extending the pedigree back in time, and that is the fact that Charles Sanderson, number 2, on line 2, is born in England. Having the information on his parents, the name of Charles Sanderson I and his wife Elizabeth, we are going to see if we can come up with a place in England. Now we also have the information that Charles has a brother John. And it is John who is the secret now to extending this pedigree lineage. For although Sanderson is not an overly common name in New Jersey, it is in England. In the obituary for the brother John, It says that John, who is aged 34 years, died at the residence of his brother, Mr. Charles Sanderson, and it says at the bottom of the obituary, Stockport, England papers, please copy. So this obituary will also appear in Stockport, England, where the family originates. What we want to do now is to see if we can use the information from the obituary of John to extend the pedigree. And the most important source to check is the International Genealogical Index, which has been prepared by the Family History Library in Salt Lake City. It now contains approximately 150 million vital records for the entire world. When we check it for the place where Stockport, England is located, we get a bingo. For there is a Charles Sanderson who is listed as having married Elizabeth Brown in Mottram in Longondale, and there is a Charles Sanderson who is the son of James Sanderson and his wife Hannah, who was christened in the parish church of St. Mary's in Stockport. It is at this point that we must consult a map of England in order to determine exactly where these places are and what their relationship is to each other. Because it's possible that we have the right family, we have both his christening and his marriage, but we won't know that, at least we won't know whether it's a possibility until we check the map. So we're going to look at the map, which the Gazetteer has told us will be in and around the urban area of Manchester in the northern part of England. We find Stockport, which is a fairly good-sized town, which is highlighted on your screen. Just to the east, we find Mottram in Longondale, which is approximately 20 miles distance. So the two places are in close proximity, and we could have the right family. This is a very important find and will enable us now to bypass a great deal of research if it is in fact correct. So we have updated our family chart now on the basis of the International Index entries, and you'll notice that these entries are now in red on our pedigree chart. This is kind of a warning for us to stop now and to actually prove that this is the right entry. That is a segment that would have to be done in a more advanced research class. We have now come up with 3 complete generations. One now that extends an additional distance into England. And if we have the information correct, we have now arrived at a 4-generation pedigree for our Sanders, as we've created it from the information in our family sources and our research information coming from vital records. On your screen now you see the source checklist for vital statistics, which includes births and deaths and marriages, and then marriage records as a separate category, because although they fall into the category of vital statistics, they also have a separate category of their own with a number of different kinds of marriage records, some of which we could look at to fill in some of the gaps on this chart. We have also consulted the International Genealogical Index compiled by the Family History Library in Salt Lake City, and it is highlighted under the topic of compiled sources from the Family History Centers. You will notice that there are 3 additional categories that we can use: Family Group Records Archives, the Temple Index Bureau Archives, the Ancestral File, and then an inactive file at the present time called the Family Register. You can access all of these at your local Family History Center on computer and on microfiche. And we do invite you to check out the center and these resources to see how they will extend your own family lines. It is an exciting time to do your family tree. There are many resources that you can access right in your own armchair. These are listed at the end of the tape, along with the addresses where you can write for vital records. I have, in addition, 3 books that will help you if you want to know more and to trace your family further. First, Family History for Fun and Profit, which picks you up from this tape and takes you the next steps. Ancestry's Guide to Research, which is a series of case studies that show you how to put all the parts together. The Source, which will help you in searching the additional sources that we have not had time to cover on this tape, which are also available so that you can do your family tree. I have enjoyed sharing the Sanderson family tree with you, and I hope that you will enjoy doing your own family tree.